Hi, my name is Joseph Alai. Welcome to my channel. And today I want to talk about the masterful way, an all-inclusive guide, step-by-step techniques on how to manifest a specific person in a laser-targeted, specific, focused way. Now, this video comes from high demand. I've received thousands of emails, thousands of messages, spent hundreds of hours speaking to clients and analyzing all of the data, taking all the questions that I've been asked, and I've compiled it into this extremely exhaustive manual, the Bible of sorts, on manifesting a specific person using the Neville Goddard techniques and the techniques that actually work. So first of all, if you have not done so before, absolutely hit the like button. It does something to the algorithm from which people who would not normally be able to see this video will be able to see this. Subscribe and hit the bell icon if you want to know more laser targeted ways on the systematic methodology to manifest anything that you want in your life in a predictable way. So let's just jump right into it. Now, I wanted to say something before we get started. I have a document, a checklist of sorts that's also available to go with this video, and you can look at the subscription, or there's probably a little thing that pops up on the top of the screen where you can get that. So manifesting a specific person, why did I make this video? Now, all these different questions such as, is it possible? Which, first of all, I'll answer that one right off the bat. Absolutely yes. It is absolutely possible to manifest a specific person. More people are messaging me today than ever. Those who have been following my videos, those clients of mine, and those who have attended my workshops are finding success after success after success. And so first thing that we need to get out of the way is just the question, is it possible? Yes, all things are possible. And the reason why is because all things exist now. Now, my methodology and testing comes generally from the Bible or scripture, but in the mystical way, in the mystical reading or interpretation of the Bible. Now, in the Bible it says is that all things exist now. There's nothing new under the sun. And basically, there are infinite dimensions from which we can draw upon. And if we know how to select and activate a dimension, then there is absolutely nothing that can stop us from receiving what we want. So that is the first question that needed to be addressed right away before we jump into the rest. And some of the other topics that we'll cover in this thorough guide is what should I be imagining? How does manifesting work in general when it comes to a specific person? How to essentially influence another being into doing something? What should I be thinking during the day? What do I do if I address or if contrary thoughts pop into my mind? What do I do if people bring it up? How do I live my life regularly during the day? How often should I imagine? Should I continuously imagine? What other techniques can we use? What do I do when I finally get in contact with them? And the list can go on and on and on, but I'm gonna make this all inclusive. And if you have never manifested before, or if you're an expert at it, this guide is the guide that was compiled from all the data that I've used, from all the thousands of testimonials submitted to me through the videos. And so this is the video to watch. So the first thing I want to talk about is exactly how to do it. Now, manifesting in and of itself is something that we're doing all the time. So to say that there's a separation between us and manifesting and that we have to actually invoke some special power in order to get what we want is not actually true. And in fact, our very lives, the entire existence that we've experienced thus far has been a sum total of all the manifestations complete from our beliefs, ideas, imaginal acts, things we write down, inner conversations, memories, moods. Every single aspect of our awareness is continuously being replicated outward. So if we've encountered things that we do not like, if we've experienced heartache, if the person that we want has left us, or if we've never been able to get them before. So the thing is that all of this exists and everyone is drawn into your consciousness because they are you pushed out. So your very experience, the totality of your experience and all of the events therein are manifestations or your consciousness pushed out. So the process from which that unfolds is very simple but very important, because this is where the rest of the fundamentals lay upon. So the idea is that everything in this world, objective, first existed in the mind. And so the way that this works, or the way that I can explain this, is that all of this sensory external stuff that we're seeing, this objective world, is all made up of senses, right? We sense them, we experience them. And experience is all done and known, right? So what senses is mind stuff, right? So everything we sense and experience is mind stuff. And mind stuff is made up of knowing. You know that you see me watching this. You know that you feel your phone or your laptop or your tablet or TV. You know that you hear me. You know that you're wherever you are now. But all of that is done through senses, and knowing is through awareness. So if I asked you the question, what is it that is aware of being you? You may first say, what does that even mean? But when we say a statement like, I am Joseph Alai, I live in San Diego, California, I am from New Jersey, I am wearing a black shirt. Who is this I? I love myself. Who's the I that loves myself? Now that I is awareness. That's the God of Scripture. That's the all-powerful, all-wise, all-creative being. And that is where everything exists within. If you think about it, everything that you've ever experienced has taken place in awareness. And therefore, awareness itself is where all things are made. And so the idea is that we are in this awareness, and therefore we must be made up of awareness. And we seem to be an independent individual being, but nevertheless, we all are the same being, the same awareness. And so if we are that awareness, then we are creative. And then therefore, that is where manifesting stems from. And so when it comes to manifesting a specific person, the idea is that there's infinite states, infinite possibilities, infinite dimensions. And the idea is to select a dimension, and when we activate it, a series of events or a bridge of incidents will unfold and lead you to that end result. Now, that is the way that we have always been living our lives. Even our physical body, anything in this external three-dimensional world is within and refracted by awareness. So it's basically like this is all one big screen, but inside awareness. And so that means we are all one. And that means that I, as the creator, have the power in my existence to put people in states, lift them out of states, and the same thing with myself. And we're all, the whole physical world is a slave to the awareness, and not in a negative way either. It's just that once we set something into motion, there's no way to, in our carnal being, get out of it. And even our very activities during the day have been set into motion by our awareness. Now, this awareness, the question then comes, how does this relate to manifesting a specific person? And how do I operate this awareness? So as Neville Goddard says, and it says this in Scripture, is that Christ was crucified in Golgotha. Now, Golgotha means the place of the skull. And it says, through him were all things made, and without him was not anything made that was made. Now think of that. That is the imagination. It says the power and wisdom of God is the imagination, is Christ. And so therefore, you can prove this by imagining. You imagine something, and then in a miraculous, spectacular way, the thing that you have imagined is created. It's created and it is expressed and returned back to the person who has imagined. So everyone is you pushed out, because whatever we imagine, the world will conform to that. The people within it will always be playing the part that you have assigned them. So the person who has left you, the specific person who's left you, the specific person that you want, specific person who has moved across the country, whatever state of affairs, the argument that you encountered, all of this played a part of the perfect script with you as the director. And therefore, if you are the director and you caused your experience to happen, then you can go in and change the cause. You as the director, now it's not Joseph Alai who is the director. Joseph Alai is the operator of the power, but the one who essentially obeys is this awareness. The one who executes the things that we impress upon him or it is we are the operant power. The imagination is the operant power, and then awareness itself refracts it on this world. So the reason I say all that stuff is because we are the creator. All things are possible. There's infinite states behind the scenes, not in this physical reality, so to speak, but behind the scenes, there are all things possible. They're all potential. And so if we can somehow impress the proper thing on our imagination, on the subconscious mind, then we will be able to experience, we must experience it in this external world, because we cannot separate ourselves from this creation. We cannot separate ourselves from the external world that we have created. And if you reverse engineer the things that you have experienced in this world, the arguments, the breakups, the not being able to maintain a relationship, all of these things are always set into motion by the subconscious mind. Your beliefs, your memories, your desires, your imaginal acts, these are continuously holding the world in a very specific, balanced way. Now, there's a delay between when we imagine and when it's impressed and when it is manifested on the external world. But the moment we actually imagine fully and impress upon the subconscious, the seed is planted. The seed is planted, that dimension is activated, and then you will go through a bridge of incidents, a time delay, a chain of events, a series of events that you could never possibly devise, that is perfect, intelligent, and masterful and loving, that will get you to that end. So the possibilities are endless. You can have whatever you want. All things are possible to him that believes, and with God, all things are possible. And in Scripture, God is referred to as the imagination or awareness. So to sum up the first part of this, it is that everything in this world, your experience, is based solely and completely upon what dwelt within your imagination or what is in your subconscious. So when you get to that perspective, you find that if that's the case, then certain things that I don't want, how do we remove them? Certain things that I want, how do I create them? And thus, that is where the process of impressing the subconscious mind begins. So the idea, if we take that premise, is to push or impress upon awareness the thing that we desire in its exact likeness, and then awareness in turn refracts it out. It does it in its own magical, intelligent, brilliant way. And so to impress upon the subconscious mind, we need to define a plan. We need a plan, a game plan. We don't want to just jump into this haphazardly. This is an important thing. This is what you want. So from that point of view, what we have to do is outline something that we can impress upon the subconscious mind. So what do we outline? So we know that the awareness replicates what's on our subconscious. That's a given, and that is something that you should be testing over and over until you find that it is true. It does not do something like what you've imagined. It doesn't randomly pick things. It is literally, the attempt is to replicate the exact image of the thing impressed on your mind. And when you stack multiple images on top of each other, such as in a movie, and when you start adding senses and vividness to it, then you add more reality or accuracy to the scene. And when you do that, when awareness refracts it out, you will experience a very accurate representation of the thing that you have imagined. So in this case, if you want to manifest a specific person, you've got to define your scene. Now, awareness, if you notice what I said here, is that awareness will refract out what you have given it. So what that means is we need not figure out how it's done. That's the brilliance, that's the genius and the power of the awareness of God. And so we focus on the end. Now, everything that we imagine, when it's replicated out, it must reach its fulfilled point. And the fulfilled point, perhaps it's not an instant thing. Perhaps there has to be something in the middle. There's something between A and B, and that's what manifesting is brilliant with. So the idea is awareness will fill in the gaps. Anything left up to generality, anything ignored and just left up to ambiguity will be replaced and filled in with the intelligence and brilliance of awareness. Now, this is infinite brilliance, infinite intelligence, because all things exist in awareness, and therefore anything that's possible exists in awareness, and therefore there's nothing that awareness doesn't know. So the fastest way possible is always the road that awareness takes when reproducing the imaginal acts that we feed it. So the end result should be something along the lines of a wedding anniversary, or a day after marriage, or an hour after marriage, sometime after your desire had been fulfilled already. And so the reason we do that is because everything in the middle must be filled in through the easiest, fastest way in order for us to get to the thing that we've imagined. But if we do start putting things in the middle, such as a text message or a phone call, what happens is if we start doing different scenes, then these are each different individual manifestations that are not necessarily connected to each other. And this is one of the great questions that I'm always asked, and I learned the hard way, and I'm sure probably many of you have, which is why you're watching this now, is that when you imagine the middle, you end up manifesting the middle sometimes, but it has no relation to what you actually want. It's not the end, it's only a middle and then it dies, because each vision in and of itself has its own appointed hour, its own flesh. It will be made flesh by awareness, but if you plant different ones, then they will not necessarily be connected to each other. So a lot of people have had their heart broken over and over again because they keep imagining the middle. They keep imagining the middle. And so they'll get the middle, but then it dies. Get the middle, and then it dies. So the key here is to absolutely, certainly go to the end. Now, another drawback of the middle is that I've seen it's almost like a manipulative or a brute force way to try to coerce the awareness to give you exactly what you want. Now, this again, I have found that it does not work. Now, Neville Goddard says that the subconscious does not do well with coercion, and this is an exact example of that. Now, if you choose the end is perfect because all things will go to the end. But if you choose the end, and then you start saying, I want it now, so I want to imagine this. I want it now, and I want to imagine this. What I've seen is things collapse. I've seen things that I won't mention specifically, but if you may have been one of these people, you can always fix it, though, by just simply going to the end. So, okay, what do we imagine? We jot down and we construct a scene which would imply that you already are married. Now, whether it be the wedding ring, whether it be an anniversary dinner and the wedding ring, whether it be in bed together going to sleep saying, I'm grateful to be married with you. Now, the idea is to make the scene, as I said earlier, as specific as possible when it comes to the subject or object of your desire, but then also as general as possible so as to fill in the blanks. And I'll give you a short example of that. So if you wanted to get married with someone, but you don't know where you're going to live, you don't know what you're going to be doing, you don't know any really thing except that you are going to be married. So the object of your desire is marriage. So you would construct a scene, outline it on a piece of paper. Remember, we're talking about efficiency here. So this is the way that you can be sure that when you imagine, you won't be confused. You outline it on a piece of paper, and you would say, the objects, the necessities, right? So leave the rest that don't matter out of it. So the necessity is married, 1 year, happy with such and such's name. And then you could give it a little bit more. You could do a public place if you want to go eat somewhere, or you could do in a bedroom sleeping and just both with the rings on. Now, the keys here, as you can see, are the wedding ring. And another aspect that we should plan in here is what we should be speaking to the other and what the other should be speaking to me. Now, a good rule of thumb is to make your scene between 3 and 5 seconds long. And the only reason for this is because we can, actually there's multiple reasons. The first reason is accuracy can be really honed in here. And also, if we can, it'll be much easier to get the full thing to play. And then also we can repeat it in brief intervals, and it will strengthen the intensity of the imaginal act, leaving a better impression on the subconscious mind. So these are multiple, one more reason is you don't get lost when you're imagining, right? You can continuously stay focused on the end. So what do you do once you have this? What do you do once you have your scene outlined? Now, one thing to note, first person point of view is absolutely critical, because if you remember what we said before, the awareness takes a replication. It produces a replication of the imaginal act. So if we are viewing ourselves from first person point of view, then that means that in its exact likeness, we will experience things from our own perception. But if we watch on like a movie, there's a chance this will work depending on the other aspects of your awareness, but it's not certain, right? So what we're looking for here is the laser targeted, precise way. Now, I've seen, and I mentioned this before, someone who was doing third person, and then there was a picture taken with the specific person, and she was doing it with somebody else. And so that's what we want to avoid. So first person point of view. So once we do that, what do? The whole idea is I'm going to talk about the state akin to sleep. Now, despite what is said commonly, state akin to sleep does not just mean falling asleep while imagining. What it means is there's a very small window before you fall asleep where you're kind of asleep, but you wake yourself up. And then when you're in that state, it's like this dream state that's fully malleable, like potter's clay, and you can easily construct whatever you want, and it should be very clear and visible. Now, if you can get that down, if you can wait till you fall asleep and then wake yourself up and then bring that scene into your imagination, then you'll be good as gold. So if you want to do that, that would be perfect. And then what you would do is you would bring the scene into your imagination and you would repeat it over and over and over in first person point of view, which means you're looking through your own eyes at the other person. You can look at your hand just like you would be looking normally. You would not be looking at yourself on a movie. That's not how you really are. You're looking through your own eyes. So once you are in that state akin to sleep, you bring the scene that you've outlined previously into your mind's eye. Don't add anything to this at this point. Just bring it in and repeat it over and over. And once you do this, if you can get this stable, even if your mind wanders and you keep having to bring it back over and over and over, eventually you will get the scene to play out. And if you get the scene to play out, then you keep looping it and looping it. And what happens is the intensity will increase. And with the intensity increasing, the feeling will start to increase because it will really seem like you're there. And if you really feel like you're there, eventually it will feel natural. So that's generally the process of imagining. First, it's struggle to get your mind to stay put. Then you can relax and start to bring it in. Once you bring it in, you begin to loop it until you could play it out fine. And then you keep looping it until the intensity builds. And then eventually you feel the feeling of actually being there. And on top of it, it will have a natural feeling. And the last step in that is to feel a saturated feeling, or just keep repeating it over and over until you fall asleep. If you can fall asleep while in the scene, then it's a done deal. It takes practice to do this though, but it's very worth the rewards, because generally speaking, 99% of the time, the first time I imagine, if I can do this in the state akin to sleep and fall asleep in it, I'll get it very, like within one imaginal act. So now that doesn't mean I'm going to get it the next day, but it means that I've planted the seed properly. So what do we do after we have done that? Or how many days should we do this? And also, what should we be thinking in the interim? So what happens after you imagine? How often do you imagine? So first of all, the idea is to imagine until your mind is saturated with the idea. So what does saturated with the idea mean? Some of the indications that you have successfully imagined, planted the seed, and then that means it doesn't matter what happens after that for you as far as you imagining, is you will get an intense feeling of satisfaction or saturation. So what that means is that you will feel very full, or you will get an exciting jolt towards the end of your imaginal act. And as a matter of fact, if you get this feeling, then oftentimes after you do it at that point, it almost as if it doesn't, you'll never get that same sensation again. So the naturalness that unfolds from you getting a clear and accurate imaginal act repeated to intensify the reality of this scene in first person point of view, the satisfaction will essentially be fulfilling. And fulfilling in the sense of, like I said one more time, it's like this excited, full, complete feeling of naturalness of having imagined. Now, if you do not reach that point, if you fall asleep before you do this, or if you just can't reach that point, or if you can't get it focused, then doing this each night, night after night, until you get a thorough and full saturation is what I would highly recommend. But after you get that saturation, technically it is done. So, but what do you do the next day? What do you think about during the day? So this is a crucial topic that I'm asked continuously. Are we supposed to continuously imagine? So think of it like this. When we imagine at night, as I described before, the analytical mind is rested. It's basically reduced to a minimum, leaving the subconscious completely open so that we can impress upon it. Now, that's the ideal time. So if you think about it, the more shut off your consciousness is as far as your analytical mind, the better the impression. And that also means that the less, like when your conscious mind is fully active, when you are hyper aware and when you're going through life, the odds of you impressing your subconscious mind have been reduced to more of a minimum. So this is good news in a sense, because what that means is first of all, that means you don't have to continuously pretend like you're imagining. Now, Neville Goddard himself in some of his lectures used to describe this 3-day rule where if you can do it for 3 days, then if you can continuously remain in the state for 3 days, then you have done it. You've planted the seed. It's absolutely going to come. However, later on in his career, he talks a lot about imagining, feeling, dropping, imagining, feeling, dropping. And if you look at it in the way that we just described it, which is that during the day, our consciousness is hyper aware. So it takes more effort in the sense, or reduction of effort, meaning relaxing, calming down, closing the eyes, taking deep breaths. That's the way to impress the subconscious mind in the best way possible. So moving around your day, when you're working, when you're doing active things, engaging things, pretending that you are already married is not the optimal solution. And in fact, there's a downside to that. And this is a downside that has, it's critical to understand. When we imagine at night, we saturate the mind. That is the thing that we really take into bed with us. So it's our subconscious mind is continuously dwelling upon that information as we sleep, which is a beautiful thing. But what ends up happening is that if there are insecurities, doubts, and fears related to your specific person, then you're saturating your mind with this and it can trigger that. Now, during the day, I hear a lot of times people continuously having trouble keeping their head straight as far as not thinking about terrible things or negative things, but also that it's difficult to remain in the state. Now, remaining in the state is virtually ineffective. And in fact, if you took Pareto's principle, which is that 20% of the work accounts for 80% of the results, and you applied it to manifesting, I would say that 10% of the work accounts for 90% of the results, and that is imagining at night. So in fact, the sporadic and base, unfocused remaining in the state is not even probably a tenth as effective in my experience as when we imagine at night. So it should take off a lot of pressure as far as getting a remaining in this state, because when we do this, if we do this throughout the day and we continuously pretend, it is very much dispersed. It's inaccurate, it's non-intense, and then it also brings up this, if we're thinking about it, then it oftentimes brings up this doubts and insecurities that are related to to your imaginal act. So just to sum it up, during the day, you do not have to pretend that you are married. And in fact, it can have contrary results due to the negative feelings that you have. And then not only that, but it's crucial at a certain point to release imagining, to cease to imagine, or to at least sporadically take breaks and stop imagining. And the reason for this, as Neville describes it, and this is what I've proven to myself, and this is the best way actually that I manifest everything that I do now, is imagining, saturating, and releasing and ceasing to imagine. Why is that though? So as Neville describes it, man does not get his manifestation. He does not get the object of his desire because he continuously conditions his imaginal act, which means what he's saying in other words is that he drops them and gets them. I drop them and get them. My clients that have got their specific people have stopped imagining and got them. Now, does this mean that you have to continue, that you have to thoroughly forget about it and never think about it again? Absolutely not. The thing is that when we imagine, when we take that window and we impress our subconscious mind, then the effect of that is very much like a magnifying glass, right? The sun going through a magnifying glass and a beam hitting a piece of paper, it catching fire. Whereas during the day, they're very base and sporadic. So if we have contrary negative thoughts, the effects of these contrary negative thoughts are very much less effective as the thing that we've imagined at night. And not only that, but keep in mind, each seed is independent and has its own appointed hour. So if you then imagine at night and get a full satisfactory imaginal act, then the thoughts and ideas that pop into your head during the day are unrelated and they will have minimal effect on against it because they're separate. They're not the same. Now, with that said, we do want to give time between the time we imagine and the time we start having any negative or contrary thoughts. But even according to Neville, and this is even my own evidence, is that we do not have to consistently remain in faith that this thing will happen. Even me, when I've manifested multiple specific people, long-term and short-term, and also thousands and thousands of other things, probably 50,000 other things. And a lot of the things that are big, during the time from when I've imagined and the time that it manifested, I had negative thoughts. I had contrary thoughts. The whole idea is to just not continuously be inundated with negative thoughts on a regular basis, because this can actually mean something else that's unrelated to manifesting a specific person, which is what I want to get into now. If you find that you are having continuous, obsessive, insecure thoughts, what I want you to do is think to yourself, were these there when you were with the person? Or has this been here before? Because there's an idea that when we have a negative thought, we flip it continuously so we don't impress a negative thing. Now, just to clarify, it is possible to create through our fleeting thoughts, but I wanted to state the magnitude of an imaginal act versus a fleeting thought. But anyway, back to the point is, if you have had, if you do have insecurities, fears, doubts, jealousies, things that are triggered when you're in a relationship, how do I put this? The solution to this is not just combating that thought and replacing it. There is something deeper within there that is creating those thoughts. And so this is the next part that I want to talk about. Obsessive thoughts, insecure thoughts, fears, doubts, jealousies, possession, codependence, all of these things are based on beliefs in the mind. And that's why I said if we continuously saturate our mind with this imaginal act and we have insecurities, then the insecurities are going to be triggered by the imaginal act and they're going to become extremely overwhelming and powerful. And those have the power to snuff out or suffocate the imaginal act if we don't give space between the time we imagine and the space those thoughts come up. But the way to get rid of those is to do a reverse engineering of sorts, to think of those thoughts in your mind. What are they coming up as? What are they popping up? What are the obsessive thoughts, those contrary thoughts? And then you go and you figure out, what if I had a belief that was producing those thoughts? What would that belief be? So for instance, if I think they're not going to be with me, this is never going to work out, I'm not good enough, they're going to choose someone else. These types of thoughts are manifested from beliefs. So the beliefs that could exist, if there were beliefs that were creating those, would be something like, I'm not good enough, or people generally leave me after I trust them, or all people that I date are cheaters. It could be any belief, any assumption. But these are what are driving those negative thoughts. Those thoughts aren't just coming from nowhere. So the idea is to go in and say, one more time, I'll say this. If these obsessive thoughts were caused by a belief in me or multiple beliefs in me, what would they be? You state that, and then so you would write it out, but you don't want to write it out in deep, thorough feeling, because otherwise it just cements it deeper. But you want to have an idea of what these beliefs could be. And then you create contrary opposite ones, and then you imagine that you have those beliefs. Now, how do you imagine that you have beliefs? How do you feel yourself with a belief that you've never felt? So what you do is you have in your imagination, just the same way as you've done a scene, you can have someone tell it to you. So for instance, if you were the one that was having an insecure thought, then I could say to you, and remember, this is what I'm going to be giving you is the contrary to your negative thoughts. So if you're insecure, if you think you're not good enough, if you think that they are on a pedestal and that they're going to leave you, I would say to you, wow, all your relationships are perfectly mutual and you're so peaceful when it comes to relationships. You're really secure. So break that down, and what I've just done is I have told you a belief that you want, but I'm telling it to you as if you already have it. And if I tell it to you like you already have it, and then you reaffirm it, so if you said back in the imaginal act, yes, Joe, that's absolutely right, I am secure in my relationships. And so basically you repeat it back. If you do that and you replay it over and over, it will plant a seed in your mind, and you will eventually, through a bridge of incidents, take on those beliefs. And so if you're having obsessive thoughts, it's critical, and I have some videos on it, I'll post that in the description for later, but definitely take care of that, because I have seen that take down more people than anyone else. And in fact, if you do not get rid of those, this is what I have seen, if you do not take care of those insecurities, then they have a habit of repeating themselves. And so if the person comes back, if you get them in the first place, and these insecurities are saturating your mind, the odds are is that they've already happened again in the past, and then they will happen again. So it's critical that you do this between the time you imagine and the time you get your specific person. Work on those beliefs so that you can be free from obsessive thoughts, and that you don't have to suffer these self-imposed consequences that you could have handled simply by just taking care of them at the time. So after we have set this into place, and after we've set into motion removing some of these beliefs and replacing them with new beliefs, from that point forward, the seed will have been planted, and a bridge of incidents will unfold that will lead us to that end result. Now, what's a bridge of incidents? Or in other words, what is contained within a seed? So everything, when manifested, because it's in this carnal physical world, it 99% of the time will unfold in a natural way. So when it comes to having someone else change, right? So for instance, if you want a specific person, you're not with them now, and you want to be together or married, then there's going to have to be a bridge of incidents that unfolds between that time so that you end up at that point. So how does that happen? Once we impress upon our subconscious mind, so we imagine the end result, we feel it real, we impress it in the subconscious, it's accepted by awareness, a seed has been planted at this point, and it will begin to flower. So every single seed that is planted has its very own unique pattern. So the pattern itself will erupt, and that's what's within the bridge of incidents. Now, a lot of times we don't see what's going on behind the scenes, and so the bridge of incidents is happening, but we're completely unaware of it. Because keep in mind now, we have one singular awareness. We can only be aware of one thing at only one given time. So that means there's infinite other possibilities of things going on behind the scenes, but this is the way that a seed works. This is the way that the awareness, God, influences or moves people to get what you want. So once we impress upon awareness, Awareness then, being connected to everyone because we're all one, begins to influence any number of people in order to give you your end. So we don't have to lift a single finger when we do this, because the awareness will begin to speak with a person's own thoughts behind the scenes. The thoughts that appear in the person's mind, they will think that they are their own, and then therefore they will take action on that. So in essence, impulses are given to any number of people, including yourself, so that people may be influenced in order to get what you want. Now, keep in mind, we don't actually have to consider the way from which they're going to be influenced. And in fact, that's completely out of our control. All we have to do is hold the image in our mind, saturate it, feel that feeling, and then awareness, or God, does the rest. The subconscious will do the rest. So the way that this generally unfolds is, say I want someone and we're broken up. What will happen is, if I imagine this, then that person will eventually be moved to take action, or you will be moved to take action. Now, I'm not saying for you to force action, and I'm not saying to try to manage and control and force another person, because that's contrary to manifesting. That's the opposite of manifesting. So what do I mean by this? Perhaps maybe they'll think of you and then they'll message you, or perhaps you accidentally bump into them somewhere, and then that will trigger in their mind more thoughts about you. Now, all of this in a perfect way is predestined or preordained as soon as you imagine the end. So all you have to do is go with the flow and trust in the process, and not react in the middle to things that you consider negative, and everything will go smoothly. So like I said, perhaps they will think about you, or perhaps they'll text you, and then maybe they'll ask you to go on a date, or maybe they'll just chat. Maybe they won't for a while. Maybe they'll come back and do it again. Remember, it's going to happen in a natural way, 99% of the time. And from my experience with my clients, that's exactly how it happens. So then comes, you date for a while, maybe you'll have a fight, maybe not, maybe you will again, maybe you will meet the family, and then maybe you'll get engaged, maybe you'll get married. And there could be infinite possibilities of different types of events that can unfold until it leads to the end. We are not in control of this, but the key here, the aspect that is crucial here is, and this is why it's important to let this go during the day, is because when these middle events unfold, sometimes it's not exactly what we want. Sometimes it looks to be the opposite. Now, we cannot compare our end result to what's happening now. Why? Why can't we do that? The reason we can't do this is because if we are in our imagination, we're married to the person, and then the person's talking to us like they're just our friend, or they're just getting in the beginning of starting to like us, then there will be a contrast. And that contrast is pain, or makes us want to force action. Now, here's the thing. If we react negatively to something happening that we don't like, every time we react, we plant a seed, right? If we have an emotional reaction to something, we will plant a seed. And that's why we don't want to continuously be comparing the current state of affairs to the end. To be present is the best bet, because then we're not comparing. Then there's much less chance of reaction within us. And so therefore, we will not be planting seeds in the interim to disrupt or disturb this manifestation as it unfolds. And that's the key, because if we can imagine and then let it go, then it will happen in the fastest way. But if we continuously react, if we can't let go, if we're obsessing, then we're going to be planting seeds in the interim. Now, here's the thing. When we react, the thing that we have reacted to must then be impressed again in the exact likeness of the style that we reacted to, and it will then be manifested again in a replica of the thing we've impressed. It's the same thing for everything. Whatever we react to, whatever we imagine, the words that we say within, they will be replicated and manifested outward. So when we are talking to a person that we desire, or when there's space between them not reaching out to us or us not reaching out to them, which in fact the best way to do this is to not reach out to them, because then we know for a fact that it's all through manifestation. So here's the thing about that. If we see things moving, then we know that our imaginal act has been heard. If we know our imaginal act has been heard, then we know it's going to manifest. So once we see something move, we should have trust and relax, opposed to then jumping back in and trying to manage and control life. So signs themselves are very powerful things. Now, there's two types of ways to look at this. If we imagine and then we let go, and if we see something that is kind of a replica of what we've imagined, then we know that we've been heard. Now, there's a verse in the Bible that says, if we know that he hears us in all that we ask of him, then we know that he already has given us the things that we have asked him for, the things that we've petitioned for. So what does that mean? That means everything that we say and hear, if we see an indication in this outside world that we've been heard, then we know that he's heard us. If we know that he's heard us, then we know that he'll give it to us. So we have to remain in the faith that he's heard us. We have to remain in the faith. And if you've imagined properly, if you feel it real, then it's certainly impressed on the subconscious mind. Now, there's another verse that goes with that. And it says, every place that the sole of your foot shall tread, that have I given to you. What does that mean? That means when you go in your imagination to a place, married, a month after, when we go there, we must go there in physical reality. So these are all verses that are basically stating, when we imagine, we're going to get it. When we imagine, we're going to get it. And to drive the idea home that we should not just be continuously comparing external to our imagination is this. It always says in the Bible, and this is what Neville says, this has been my experience, it always says, when you pray, believe you have already received it, and you shall. When you pray, enter into your closet, and your Father that's in secret, he'll reward you openly. These are indications that it's supposed to be done when we're closing our eyes and imagining, when we're relaxed in the state akin to sleep, when we are purposely imagining, not continuously all throughout the day. It's a very important distinction there, because this is going to be the difference between reacting and non-reacting. So again, I wanted to touch the point again of taking action. So when we manifest, the whole world will conspire to give us what we want. That means when we imagine, we don't have to lift a finger, and the thing that we want will come to us. So in essence, if we begin to take action purposely, a lot of times, first of all, we cannot take action if it hasn't been set into motion. So if we didn't imagine properly, or if we're trying to force action, then what happens is we're met with resistance, which often leads to force back upon us, which I'm sure you've experienced before. When you're trying to exert your will tremendously on something, you push and it pushes back. And so the best way to know if you have, if this is a manifestation, is for it to come to you. So by not reaching out, by not stalking them, harassing them, messaging them, showing up at their house, calling them 1,000 times in the middle of the night, or getting into arguments because things aren't going your way right now, that's what we have to avoid doing those things. If we avoid doing those things and we imagine and can relax, if we work on those beliefs, if we can allow things to go in the normal bridge of incidents the way that awareness has set it up, then it will always be in a perfect way. Everything manifested is absolutely perfect. It will always come in a way that is shockingly easy or astounding. And so we will, and if it is our job to play some type of part, oftentimes what happens is it's accidental. We bump into them, or we have an overwhelming impulse, or we accidentally message them or something of the like. Now, the key here is to act natural, because if we're sitting on our hands and deliberately not allowing ourselves to do anything at all, there could be a slight problem with that. Because for instance, if I manifested finding a suitcase of $1 million in it, eventually what I'm going to have to do is pick up that suitcase. So eventually when someone does reach out, we have to go in and respond normally. Meet them at the present moment, not in the moment that we are in our mind. It will eventually go there anyway. So it's important not to force, not to struggle, to exert our willpower, because all of these things will result in a backlash. it'll hurt us, we'll mess up. But I want to say something about no matter what the current state of affairs is, no matter how bad it is, no matter what the argument in the past was, we can always get what we want. All we have to do is imagine the end. And so I want to bring this part up now too, is the past. If you have things that have happened in the past, if you're hurting, if you have resentment, if you want an apology, if anything at all has happened, the key is to fix it in your imagination before you even start imagining for the future. So revision is a tactic or a tool in which we can revise the past. If we modify the past in our imagination in first person point of view, now the miraculous thing about revision is that it will change things. A person will be moved to make that true. You will be moved to make that true. So if there was an argument or something terrible that happened, if you go in your imagination and you revise it to fit this bridge of or the scene that you wish had unfolded, then things in the world must change to meet that conception. And so if there was something bad that happened where you're not on speaking terms, or if there's some resentment or anger, go to a point where either that has already been resolved, or go into your imagination and change the event to meet that. And that will dramatically change how you feel, because now you'll be moved to either forgive or move on, and so will they and everyone else involved. So the one big thing I want to talk about now is third party. Third party is something that terrifies people. It's something that I get asked a lot of questions about. Third party, if there's a third party involved, the worst thing we can do is to imagine the third party. The worst thing we can do is bring them into our imaginal acts. What that's doing in essence is literally making it more real and making it more rigid. Now think of the imagination and it as a reflection of the mind, and the world a reflection of imagination, and imagination is like potter's clay. So we can add and create and remove anything we want. So why would we ever want to mention a third party in our imagination if this world is a reflection of our imagination? So if there was a third party, the best thing you can possibly do is imagine it as if that's already done and dusted. It's not even a topic of discussion. It was such a minute thing that it is not even brought up. It doesn't even matter. If you can do this, then that third party, if there was one, will cease to exist. Something will happen that will be broken off, but don't try to force or manipulate anything or wish ill on others or anything like that, because what you're doing in essence is making it more rigid. You're making that clay into the third party. Now, as far as forgiveness and all that stuff is concerned, I've heard a lot of people say they've imagined their specific person apologize to them. Now, if that's not the end, if we want an apology, we should forgive them already inside. If we don't forgive them already inside, then we have unresolved issues. One of the core aspects to manifesting anything at all is accepting the current state of affairs as it is. If we're suppressing things, then those just basically permeate and move around and float around in the subconscious mind and manifest negative effects. So we must deal with the way things are. Otherwise, those suppressed ideas, they're not going anywhere. They're just in the subconscious mind. And we shove them down when they come up, and then they pop up again. We shove them down, and then they pop up again. But here's the thing. All things in the subconscious mind create. Now, you may not get the object of the thing that's permeating and suppressed in your subconscious mind, but adverse manifestations will begin to pour out, which is something I've experienced time and time again. So the fear that I generally hear when it comes to this is, well, if I let it come into my mind, then what if it manifests? Here's the thing. Permeating and saturating your subconscious mind through suppression is the thing that's causing all these terrible maladies and disease and negative things in your life. If you do not address these things, these negative feelings that are coming up in you, these memories, they will just infinitely create over and over and over again. Even if you get it, it's almost like it doesn't cancel out your manifestation, but it allows for an impure manifestation, because in your subconscious, it's continuously dwelling. So whatever you have to do to accept the way that things are is the best way to move forward from there. If you don't, then it's just spinning around and continuously manifesting all these obscure negative things. And then, so with all that said, I want to talk about the idea of continuously imagining versus imagining, stopping versus intermittent imagining. So this is a very crucial aspect, extremely crucial. It's one of the questions that I'm asked most frequently, and a lot of it has to do with obsession and trying to get rid of it, or wondering if they've uprooted the seed when they've been thinking about this. So how often are we supposed to imagine? When are we supposed to imagine? What's the ideal time to imagine? For how many days should I be imagining? So as I touched upon this earlier, but saturation is key. I'll say it again, saturation is key. But what happens if you oversaturate a plant? What happens if you keep watering a plant? It will drown. And so the idea is that we compress the scene into a seed. That's what we do when we're imagining. It's metaphorically creating a seed that will be dropped into awareness and then will manifest external. So externally, meaning the whole world will change to fit the conception that you're holding in your mind. So we need to then intermittently, is one of the best ways to put it, imagine. So at first, when I have something big, when I want to do something, I will imagine until I'm completely filled with this feeling of the wish fulfilled, and then I'll stop imagining, right? So the idea is to compress that seed and drop it into the fertile ground of the subconscious. Now, that could look like however long it takes to get that a full solid seed, right? So say you're in a bed with a wedding ring on with a person, then if we can get that to feel realistic, if we have our inner talk there, if we had our conversation there, if we were feeling there, and we were able to loop this condensed short scene over and over in one sitting until it saturates the mind, then it's considered done, right? So there's been, personally I've tested this, and a lot of the results that I've gotten from my clients have been that imagining, feeling, dropping, meaning if they drop it, if they forget about it, and I'm sure you can relate to this, that's the best way possible. Now, that's not always possible with a specific person because we really want them. So the best case scenario would be to imagine, feel it, and then get it until the point of saturation, whether that took 1 day or 5 days or 10 days, and then take a break. You don't have to forget about it completely. You don't have to run away from it. But what happens when we imagine at night, and I think I've mentioned this, is we saturate the mind, and then the obsession, right, I did mention this, the obsession will hit if it's triggered by the imaginal act. And so if we're already having a problem thinking about this person incredibly too much, when we imagine, it triggers it forward. So to drop the seed into the ground is to cease to imagine, or to give space between the time we imagine and the next time we imagine. So what I found extremely effective, and it alleviates some of the pressure involved with dropping this thing completely, is to imagine for a while and then drop it for a while, then imagine for a while and drop it for a while. And Neville Goddard speaks of this too. Imagine, then drop. But then eventually, if it's a week or two later and you are starting to doubt yourself, imagine again. And so that, I think, will really help alleviate some of the stress as far as having to forget about it. Now, during the day, and I mentioned this briefly, but the mind will go to thinking about that person. It's going to happen. We will daydream about things. That will happen. But the deliberate act of coercion, meaning if we imagine the end and then we're trying to influence the subconscious mind to move the manifestation along, that's when the problem comes in. But it's an internal thing. We have to be the one to be honest with ourselves. Do I want instant gratification by pushing this along, or do I want that end result in its perfect fashion? So when it comes to things like if you're encountering or meeting up with them, if you want things to go well when you're with them, then imagining the successful outcome of that event itself is absolutely a fair thing to do. I myself, when I imagine big ends and then it starts unfolding midway, when the events come to me, that's when I'll imagine their successful outcome. I don't imagine the middle for the successful outcome. No, the things that come along my way, when they're presented to me, I imagine the successful outcome of that thing itself, but I'm not trying to coerce it to be related to the end. I just want it to be perfect as it is, because I always imagine for everything I do, as should you, because it makes life a lot smoother and easier. And so all in all, I want to kind of say this one thing now is when you do get your specific person, when you do have them, you should remain natural. You can imagine further down the road once you, okay, so if you have your manifestation fulfilled, right? If it's done, you're married or whatever, you just keep imagining down the road as you would naturally. This should not be something that we drop. Manifestation should not be something that we drop completely. Whereas instead, we should continue this lifestyle because the results are amazing. Now, what happens when they come back and they're starting to date you again? So be sure you continuously work on yourself in the sense of a lot of people neglect that anxiety, insecurity, jealousy. They just want this person, but they never take care of that stuff. And so the results are catastrophic. So be sure to continuously work on yourself. Make yourself better and better. Always imagine greater heights. Don't go for the short-term goals. Go for the big goals. Go for the end. The short-term ones just come and they vanish. So always be going towards the end and remain calm and natural. If they are presented in your life, when they are and they come back, that is when you just go with the flow. You already know that it's going towards your end. So remain calm and confident and keep going with the flow because it will hit your end. Once you see those signs, when you see indications that are related to your imaginal act, but not the act itself and things outside the scope of reality, then it's a sure indication that your imaginal act is coming to fruition. So when you start seeing these unfold, don't react, don't freak out, don't start to plant negative seeds, just play it cool, trust the process. And one of the ways that I've seen that's helped really tremendously with being able to alleviate some of the pressure and stress as a result of manifesting a specific person is pick up other manifestations. Start being active and proactive in your life with bigger, grander things. Because when you have your specific person, that's not the end all be all. There's a life. There's a huge, vast world out there. And so it's important to take care of ourselves. We have to make sure that we are actually loving ourselves. We have to take care of ourselves. We have to make sure we're doing the right things for us. It's not just about the specific person. It's about the full life and what we can give to the specific person. Now, one last thing, and I want to end it here, is the idea that we are simply imagining them to come to us. Now, one of the things that's so overlooked is the fact that we could be changing as well to become the person that they want. So don't be stagnant and just completely rest upon the way that you are and are forcing a person to change. You be flexible as well, because the subconscious will not only move you, but it will move you as well. And so if you're resistant, then you're cutting out half of the growth, half of the speed. So be open to suggestions, listen to others, take positive actions for yourself. Don't make the person the only object of your desire and let everything else in your world go to hell, because that's not good for you. We want to grow, we want to elevate, we want to ascend. So anyway, I hope you liked this. I've got a couple supplementary links that I'll post right here, but I hope I've hit a lot of, now this is exhaustive and full and complete. Is it every single possible question that can ever be answered? I mean, I'll have more videos like for questions and stuff, but I really hope that you enjoyed this. I hope this was helpful. If you apply this, you will get what you want. So thank you so much for watching. Hit the like button, subscribe, bell icon, and very much a thank you to anyone who has attributed questions and people that have helped me out. So thank you so much.